For the past 6 years, respondents to Nampa's annual community survey have ranked transportation improvements as a top priority. On May 21st, Nampa voters will have an opportunity to vote on a $38 million general obligation transportation bond, which includes multiple projects to address congestion on some of Nampa's busiest roadways and improve safe routes to school through sidewalk improvements. If approved by voters, improvements would be made to Treasure Valley Marketplace, Midland Boulevard, Library Square, downtown Nampa, removing the current circular pattern around the library, 12th Avenue to 11th Avenue crossover connection, also near downtown Nampa. Designed for a southeast Nampa connection to State Highway 16 and safe routes to school sidewalk improvements. The projects have been identified through community input, technical analysis, Nampa's Transportation Advisory Group, Nampa's Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, and school district officials, among others. If the bond is approved by voters, no increase to the current property tax rate is expected, as it would continue the cost from the 2004 general obligation bond, which is expiring this year. For more information, visit cityofnampa.us/Nampa bond.
I figured there'd be like a big, huge applause or something after that. That was to educate everybody, plus a good transition. We might need to bring in a couple more chairs and or make sure we scoot in. Mitch with the Nampa Chamber of Commerce. Mayor says we're bringing chairs. Hello, Mayor. That's on my notes. I want to start off by saying thank you to the Mayor and to Amy Bowman for hosting us tonight here at the city. I know we have some City Council friends that are in the room also. So again, Mitch with the Nampa Chamber, we have a team of people here, and then I saw Matt from Idaho Press is here, and Teddy, and then you'll hear from Claudia in a moment, but that's kind of your team of people that have helped put this together. A couple quick housekeeping things, and then we will just kind of get started. Reminder, if you can please turn your cell phones off, this is being recorded, and so some of these candidates will want to take that video and push that out to friends and family and so forth, so just keep that in mind that this is being recorded. And again, you saw the little bit of construction on the way in. Thank you for your patience and understanding with the construction. Bathrooms are around the corner if you did not know that. And then we're going to move fast tonight. You'll see that we've got a panel up here, and then we'll take a break and rotate through to the different districts at that time. I always like to give the answer to the test. You've already passed that. You're here. So a public thank you to friends and family members. This is not easy to be vulnerable and to serve. So congratulations to all those that have put their name and their character out there to serve, and for friends and family for supporting them. So that's way cool. Let's just give everybody a round of applause if we could, please. Okay, again, I think the Idaho Press and the Nampa Chamber, our job is to get everybody here and then now get out of the way. Claudia and Teddy, we were joking, it's kind of like Cher, everybody knows who they are. They helped us moderate other panels before, so Claudia and Teddy are going to kind of give some other housekeeping rules, and then we will get started. So again, cell phones, please. This is being recorded, and there's quite a few people that are online right now as well. So with that, Claudia and Teddy.
Well, like Mitch said, thanks everyone for being here. I'm Teddy Feinberg, managing editor with the Idaho Press. This is put on, it's a joint venture from the Nampa Chamber and of course the Idaho Press.
And I'm Claudia Weatherman, and I'm a Nampa resident and a chamber member and a community volunteer. And we're just so thrilled to see this full house and all this participation in democracy. So hopefully you will recommend the recording of this to your other friends. We're really excited about the opportunity to educate the voters about the candidates that are vying for a place on the November general election ballot and eventually our state legislature. And again, like Mitch said, especially grateful to the city for providing this space and for the technical staff and expertise. And if any of you are curious, the city of Nampa has a YouTube channel. It's City of Nampa, Idaho, 1891, the year we were established. And you can invite your friends to watch the recording there as well.
A quick rundown tonight. We invited candidates to the contested primary races from each district that overlays Nampa. Those would happen to be districts 10, 12, 13, and 23. If a candidate chose not to participate or had a scheduling conflict, their opponent was still given the opportunity to appear. A team led by the Nampa Chamber of Government Affairs Committee developed the questions. They were not made available to the candidates in advance, so they're all getting them fresh right here, right now, in real time. Responses will be timed. Candidates, please pay close attention to the cues of our timekeeper, which is Mitch.
So you'll get the warning signal. Is that red, or what color is that? Let's just go over the colors, shall we?
Well, Claudia, are they all going to be 1 minute long?
All the responses tonight will be 1 minute, up to 1 minute, we should say. If it takes you less time to answer, we can have more candidates for the questions, but...
I have a 10 seconds, and I have a red, meaning stop time, so.
Okay.
And then if it goes too long, I'll probably just let my timer go off.
And so we have the questions in a basket, and we're also going to randomize who gets to answer a question first to hopefully make it a little more equitable. So, and we just want this one reminder that hopefully we can all conduct ourselves with a spirit of civility throughout the event, and just that boisterous and disrespectful behavior by the candidates and the audience members is not going to be tolerated. And I have a couple of people with shiny badges on that are really just here as citizens to listen like everybody else, right? None of that. We're Nampa. We're good. We're peaceful. So again, our first panel will be the District 10 Senate candidates, and then the candidates from District 12. And just so you know, we kind of had to split those up to accommodate a few schedules. So we color-coded. So this is our District 10 Senate race, and then our Senate race for 12, and our House race for. So that's how you know who's running against who, is the colors. So, shall we get started?
Claudia, over here. The mics are off. They have to push the button.
Oh, yeah, that's a
Turn
good
red
piece of housekeeping.
From red to green.
Yes, you have to press it to get it to go green. Okay.
All right, so let's get the show on the road. We are starting out here with District 10 Senate. That consists of Senator Tammy Nichols and Lori Bishop. District 12 with Senator Ben Adams and Victor Rodriguez. And of course, House Seat A, Jerome Ball and Jeff Cornelius. Bell, I apologize.
And Representative Cornelius.
All right, I'm going to ask the first question. We'll start out with Senator Nichols. Idaho's Constitution currently allows citizens to gather signatures and put initiatives on the general election ballot. Do you support this form of direct democracy? Why or why not?
Thank you. So you're talking about the ballot initiative process, and we do have that as a form in Idaho to be able to utilize. I use some discretion with it. We've seen states such as California that have gone overboard with their ballot initiative process, and they do a lot of ballot initiatives now. So while I support a form of it, I want to be cautionary on how we utilize that process, and it's still going to be up to the legislative body, regardless of what comes before us through a ballot initiative process, that the legislature still has to go ahead and make the determinations on exactly what the criteria will be and how that will go into law.
Would you like the question repeated?
Let me just make sure my mic's working. No, I think I've got it. I support the Constitution of the state of Idaho, and as long as it is a part of the Constitution, then I support the ballot initiative process. I do think that there needs to be a way for the citizens to have a voice, and if it's our option as voters to not support that ballot initiative or to support it if we want to, and so I just respect the will of the people in this matter.
Senator Adams, would you like it repeated?
Yes, please.
Idaho's Constitution currently allows citizens to gather signatures and put initiatives on the general election ballot. Do you support this form of direct democracy? Why or why not?
Thank you for the question. So first off, and I appreciate the question, it's not actually direct democracy in the state of Idaho. So the legislature has the ability to overturn, so there is a check on there, but the ballot initiative process allows citizens to bring issues to the legislature that the legislature is refusing to take up. And I think that's a critical part of our form of government, and so I support it.
And Mr. Rodriguez, your take?
I agree with the Constitution of Idaho. We have to follow that to the T. If the decision by the communities are welcome to do just that, it gives them a voice. However, every once in a while, the legislators go in and start changing that a little, and I disagree with that.
Mr. Bell?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if it's in the Constitution of Idaho, we definitely have to follow that. But like Tammy said, I would caution on that. And I say that because people do tend to just throw spaghetti on the wall. They'll put a lot of initiatives in and try to overflood the system sometimes. I've seen that across the nation. So, but if it's in the Constitution, I would agree with that, yes.
And Representative Cornelius?
Yeah, we do have to follow our state constitution.
The mic.
Oh, says it's on. How's that?
Better.
Closer, yeah.
Closer is better. Yeah, we do have to follow our constitution, regardless. So but there are instances when the public needs something brought to us, and we're not doing it ourselves. Our constituents are bringing it to us. We don't know about it. So this might be a good way to bring that to our attention. So I think it might be important to be able to do that, but we have to follow the Constitution.
We've seen Idaho laws that result in legal challenges and special sessions, which are costly for taxpayers. What can be done to minimize unclear or controversial legislation? And we'll start this with...
Well, it is concerning that we've passed a lot of legislation lately that ends up going to the courts, and it does cost the taxpayers a lot of money, and that's definitely concerning. I think that we can avoid that by listening to our advisors, the AG's office, and sometimes we might even need to get outside opinions from the governor's office and really just tread carefully there and make sure that if we have gotten like a consensus opinion back that it's going to go to the courts, that we need to rethink that and make sure that we are, we need to save our battles for the most important battles and not be frivolous in our legislation.
Mr. Adams, with the question repeated.
Yes.
We've seen Idaho laws that result in challenges and special sessions of the legislature, which are costly for taxpayers. What can be done to minimize unclear or controversial legislation?
Thank you again for the question. So in the 4 years that I've been in the legislature, the state of Idaho and our country at large has been dealing with a lot of big issues that impact our voters. And big issues equal big fights in the courts. And that is part of the political process. That is something that is going to happen. So as far as making sure that we win those cases, it's about making sure that the laws that we're writing are well written, have the right intent, and that we make our case. As far as special sessions go, I'll give you an example. We wanted to, there are many of us legislators that wanted to go back in and put in the presidential primary. And we tried to get a special session, and we couldn't because we had made it so tight to where we just didn't have consensus. And so we avoided spending taxpayer dollars, but at the expense of voter turnout.
Okay. Mr. Rodriguez, do you need the question repeated?
No, I understand it. It's called the due process of mandating or bringing a bill to the legislator. The process should be a look at making up this bill, and then they should be going to the view to see whether this is within the rights, whether it's in the right direction, and therefore it would be clear and concise by the time it hits the legislators. At the time, because more than ever, we find more controversial issues coming back and forth to us. Those are time-consuming, and so rather than look like we're going in all kinds of different directions, the due process should make it adaptable to each law. By the time it's passed, there are no questions asked. It's the right, correct law. That's what I believe.
All right, and Mr. Bell, would you like the question repeated?
No, I'm fine. Unfortunately, here in Idaho and across the nation, we have become a sue nation. You're not going to please everybody, no matter what. And so I think we need to have a system to where if, let's say, a defendant brings up a lawsuit for a specific item, then if they lose that case, then they pay. I don't believe the citizens should be tabbed with a bill on a frivolous lawsuit, because a lot of these lawsuits are frivolous. We elect representatives for a reason, and it's called voting. So if you don't like what your representative has voted on, if you don't like the laws, then you vote out your representative. I don't think we should have a bunch of frivolous lawsuits, but unfortunately, that's the age that we're in here in America.
No, I'm good. I think it starts with us. I realize that a lot of legislation is brought just by simply having an idea, which is where it all starts, but then you take it to our LSO, our attorneys who help us draft this, and they're eager to work and draft a nice bill, but we haven't always checked it out with the AG's office. That happens all the time. And I think that needs to be part of the process in a lot of these bills, especially the big bills, like Senator Adams said, because there are a lot of controversial bills now that we really need to vet before we get them on the House floor. And I will add one other piece to this, is take a bill like that that's complicated, controversial, now bake it in with another bill or two, an omnibus bill. That's something we shouldn't be doing as well.
And our final person to answer the question, Senator Nichols.
Thank you. So yes, in Idaho, we have quite a vetting process that takes place in the legislative body. We have many attorneys, we have many lobbyists that have attorneys, we have attorneys that are in the legislature, and so there's quite an extensive vetting process that takes place before a bill actually gets to the floor and gets passed. Now that being said, there's going to be challenges. We are dealing with very controversial topics in today's society. In fact, we have one in front of the U.S. Supreme Court currently right now, where our AG just came back from to argue. And so even though a bill might go through quite a process, there's going to be times when someone's not happy with that, or there might be something that was missed, and it might go through a legal phase. And that is part of the process. As far as special sessions go, yeah, sometimes things happen where we do need special sessions, and we need to be able to deal with issues that we had no idea were even going to come to pass. That happened during COVID. So there are times when that happens, but I think as a whole, we try to really keep that at bay, and I think overall we do a fairly decent job at it.
Thank you all.
I'm going to start with Senator Adams here. It's estimated that just 93% of registered Idaho Republicans participated in this year's presidential caucus. What are your ideas to expand participation and interest in our democracy?
Thank you.
I meant 7% participated, not 93.
Wow, that turnout is great.
If 93 participated, we wouldn't have a question to ask.
Teddy, good job just testing the audience.
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's pretty well documented that we had a low turnout in the caucus. Now, that isn't to say that the folks that were running the caucus didn't do a great job. They worked very hard. There's a lot of work that goes into that. However, I think we need to get a primary back into statute for presidential elections, which is why I tried to every avenue that I could as a state senator to get us back into session so we could put that back in. And I also voted this year to create a primary in April to try and compromise these are negotiations between a lot of people, and I'm only one of them. The important part for me is that we reestablish a primary so we can have a higher voter turnout and the people's voices can be heard at the ballot box.
Do you need the question repeated,
No,
Mr.
I-
Rodriguez? I'll get the number right if I ask it again.
Well, go ahead and ask it again then. Actually, I attended the caucus at Lone Star School District 12, and I was kind of disappointed that there was only about 150 people there. In District 12, there are 25,000 voters. For 150 to show up, I thought that was kind of discerning. It didn't work. Maybe we should go back to where it was before to get more involvement in our community and our voters. Let them decide. The Republican Party decided this was the best route. Well, let's take a look at it now. Maybe it's not.
Mr. Bell.
Caucuses have worked around the nation in different states like Iowa. You know, they have caucuses, New Hampshire, things like that. But as long as we keep primaries closed here in Idaho and no ranked choice voting, I would consider definitely going back to primaries, because what happens when you open primaries, Democrats come and vote. And I've seen states like Virginia get destroyed and turn blue once they went to open primaries. So if we want to keep Idaho red, we want to keep Idaho conservative, if we want to do presidential primaries, then we need to ensure that all of the primaries are separate. We need to have just Republican primaries, and they need to stay locked tight, closed, or you're going to see Idaho change for the worse.
Representative Cornelius.
Well, I think initially that if we don't have a caucus again, it will increase our voter turnout. That was a poor showing, just because it was confusing. It's confusing to everybody. That primary, but instead we did the caucus. So we need to start by getting away from the caucus.
Senator Nichols.
Yes, I would agree with much that's been said. I'm good with a primary. I'm good with a caucus. Because of the timeline that we were dealing with and the time frame that we had to work within, we had no other choice because we could not get back into session to be able to fix that. We're seeing states all around, though. Utah actually just went back to a caucus system. So there's states that are actually going back to that direction. You know, whatever works best for the people is what I think is the best way to approach it. We have low voter turnout in lots of our elections, unfortunately, and I think that's one of the things that we really do need to increase regardless, is to get more people to come out and vote, but also to make sure that we have secure elections. The ranked choice voting is very concerning to me. I don't want to see that come into our state. Alaska's been trying to get rid of that, and I think if we unfortunately go that direction, we're going to have a lot of problems in our upcoming elections. So primary or a presidential caucus would be fine.
And Ms. Bishop.
When I'm elected, I will work really hard to restore the primary. I was really disappointed in the caucus. Not only was there incredibly low turnout, far lower than in a regular primary, but it disenfranchised a lot of voters, including veterans. My husband's a veteran. He was gone for a year and a half, missed an election. It disenfranchised our law enforcement and our healthcare workers who may have been on shift at that time, and people with young children or elderly people. I had a neighbor who was in a wheelchair who was waiting outside in the freezing cold for 40 minutes. So I would make every effort to restore a primary. I'm open to listening to different ideas about when that date is, whether it's March, April, or May, but I would like to see that restored.
Next question, we'll start with Mr. Rodriguez. Do you think it's the legislature's job to make statements or take positions on national issues?
Well, that's a good one, because we are the national issues. The state of Idaho is involved in those because of our communities. Anytime you have an agenda-based direction, that causes controversy. The legislators have a direction and have a goal to complete for us, the communities. And I think they should stay within those realms.
Would you like that repeated, Mr. Bell?
I'm fine. I think state representatives should have a voice and should make statements on national issues, because what happens in the nation affects Idaho, especially when you have a state that's the budget is 40% into the federal government. When the federal government can control your money, then you have to have a say. So I definitely believe that we need to be voiceful, like the border situation. We really need to be voicing that border, what's going on in the invasion of our country, because we may not be a border state, but every state is a border state now, and we're going to reap the repercussions of that. We may not be feeling it like states like Texas or Florida, but Idaho will start to feel that at some time, and I'm sure some of you have already seen that. So we definitely need to have a big voice on what goes on nationally.
No. Yeah, we absolutely should have a voice on the national scenery, and we do now. They're talking about one of our bills right now, and it affects us. Everything that's going on in this country affects Idaho as well as it does every other state. Why shouldn't we be leading? Somebody else has got to lead, or somebody has to lead. Might as well be us. We're innovative. We think outside the box. We get things done. We did pass a Senate joint memorial to Biden to close the border, fix immigration, those kinds of things we can do all day long. And to take a bigger stance like we are right now on the one that's talked about nationally, I think, yeah, absolutely, we can lead and should.
Senator Nichols, would you like it repeated?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, we should definitely have a say in what's happening at a national level. Every state is impacted on what's going on nationally. We just look at what inflation's doing right now to each one of us, what it's doing to our food prices, to gasoline, to all of the commodities. We are all dealing with inflation right now, and it's costing every family an additional $10,000 per year to be able to afford exactly what they did last year at this time. Idaho has taken the lead in several different things, but I think Idaho should take the lead in even more. We were the first state to pass any type of AI legislation a few years ago, which I carried, and we were the first state to pass women protection in sports. So Idaho does have a say, but we need to have a louder voice, and I believe that, yes, we as legislators, as a state as a whole, should be speaking out on those national issues.
I want to make sure I'm answering correctly. Can you repeat that?
Do you think it is the legislature's job to make statements or take positions on national issues?
Well, as a state legislator, I would make sure that I was fully informed on all local issues and the things that my constituents would want first, and concentrate most of my time and energy on the things that I can control. On state policy that we are allowed to make, things that we can affect, that's where I put most of my energy. I certainly think talking about national issues is a great discussion, but we need to always bring it back around to what can we do within the purview of the state legislature to, combat against, the problems that we're having at the border, the economy, things like that, but focus on what we can actually do about it.
Okay. Senator Adams? Okay.
I'm good. Of the people, by the people, for the people. Overwhelming majority of people in the United States do not live in Washington, D.C. They live in the states. Our entire system of government is built on the push and pull between the states and the federal government. And I am very proud to say that the state of Idaho punches above our weight class when it comes to national issues. If we don't say anything, if we don't make statements and take positions on issues that are affecting our national government, then we're just going to be beholden to a swamp city thousands of miles away, and I have no intention of doing that.
We'll start with Mr. Bell here. What is your grade of the legislature's performance this year? And considering that, how would you follow up on that over the next 2 years if you are elected?
With the laws that have passed, they've been pretty conservative for the most part. So I would give them a B+ to an A-, because there are some bills that probably should have gotten through the legislature that's more conservative, or that is conservative, and some of those bills failed, and they failed because some of the Republican and conservative legislators voted against those bills. And if we are supposed to be a conservative state, we are supposed to be, like been said, by the people, of the people, for the people, that most of the people here are conservative. And if you're voting against that to where conservative bills are not getting passed, then there's an issue. And that's one reason I'm actually in this race. But we definitely, I would give them a B+ to A-. They've actually done a pretty good job this year. And I will continue that and hopefully increase that over the next 2 years.
Would you like the question repeated, Representative Cornelius?
Yeah, please.
How would you grade the legislature's performance this year? And based off that grade, how would you follow up on that over the next 2 years if you are elected?
I believe we got a B+, A. We passed a lot of big bills, a lot of big controversial bills that took a lot of effort to get them over the finish line. We increased our education budget. We got teachers up to salaries where they should be now. We've done a lot of work this year, big work. There's more to do. There's stuff we didn't get done that we can come back and finish next year. And if we do that, I will grade it a high grade again. But there's more bills coming that we don't even see yet. We'll work on those over the summer. That's kind of how it goes, but there's a lot coming that we don't even know yet, but there's a lot to finish. So when we're back there, we will get those jobs finished.
Would you like the question repeated?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
I would give us probably a B-. I think there was some pieces of legislation that definitely should have gone through that unfortunately did not make it, and some things that should not have gone through. But I have to say, probably what I say was our greatest success was getting the new process of our budget. That was a huge success. In the past, Idaho has done exactly what Congress does, and that's omnibus spending bills. And this year, we were able to separate those bills out into necessity bills, so keeping the lights on, keeping things functioning, and then excess spending bills. That was a huge success for not only the legislature, but for you, the people of Idaho, because it's your tax dollars that we're dealing with. Prior to this session, we were only looking at about 18% of the budget, and that is a disgrace, I think, because if we only look at 18% of our budget, we're missing out on a lot of different things that we're spending money on, or needs that we have that we aren't addressing. So that was a huge success, I think, for the people. It created transparency, it created greater accountability, and I think it's going to help us to get our budget under control, because we are spending almost $1 billion a year that our budget is going up in Idaho.
Would you like it repeated, Ms.? You're good?
No, thank you.
All right.
I'm okay. I would give the state legislature a C this year. I think some good things happened. We saw some momentum in some areas with some tax relief and some property tax relief for education in particular. I thought some really bad bills were killed either on the floor or even better in committee. And but I'm really concerned about these Christmas tree bills that pack a lot into one bill. They're impossible for the average citizen to pick apart and understand, and they're really difficult for the legislators to vote either for or against because there's so many different pieces. And when I'm elected, I will advocate for efficient and streamlined government, and I don't think that those big Christmas tree bills are an example of streamlined, efficient government. I'm good.
You're good.
You know, I thought I was going to be the critical one and say a C, but we already have it. In any legislative session, you're going to have bills that pass that you like and bills that pass that you don't like, and some things you like and don't like in the same bill, unfortunately. We did provide tax cuts, again, property and income tax cuts. We passed some legislation that's going to preserve some of the traditional values we have in our state. We made a lot of efforts to preserve our natural resources here in the state. Water is life, and the Snake River Reservoir was expanded as far as the measurements, so we can make sure that that water is there for generations going forward. Some of the drawbacks, we didn't get the primary back in, and the school funding facilities bill, although it helped Nampa a lot, I think it was $46 million that will go to facilities here in Nampa. It didn't help a lot of the schools that actually are struggling through property taxes to raise or to actually repair their buildings. So there were some highs and lows.
Would you like it repeated?
No, I'm good, thank you. In order to me to assess a grade for the state legislators, I'm going to show you that what I believe should have been a priority, and then I'll go from there. First would be protecting our citizens' rights and securing our freedom. Also, tax reform, personal and business. Also, restructured exemption for house assessments for our personal properties. And new development pays for development. The state legislator in the past years have developed a bill that actually mandated the city's government to reduce their income by House Bill 389. And I know that the legislators attempted to take care of that and to remedy that this year. But on the other side of this, there are other bills that I thought was good. So I'm going to give them a C, but that's all I can give them right now.
Great, and this will be our final question for this set. And so the first answer comes on to Representative Cornelius. And this is long, but I'm not going to ask you if you want me to repeat the question. I'll just wait for you to tell me, and I'll totally get it because it's long. Republicans have typically advocated for less government, but we're seeing more state legislation reaching into the local government level. A few examples: library content and city ordinances around short-term rentals. In the past, these have been the purview of local school boards, library districts, and city councils. Is it appropriate for the state to mandate local matters and weigh in on local matters? Why or why not?
Boy, that's a big question.
It's long, lots of lines.
And yeah, there's a lot there. Yeah, you bring up bills like the library bill. That's tough. Because nobody wants our kids to be exposed to something that they shouldn't be exposed to. But we also have these, and we don't mandate that. So it's an issue. And it's probably more of a generational issue because of electronics. So should we protect our children? Yes. Should we leave that up to the local jurisdictions when we can? Absolutely. We talked to the representative or council member talked about House Bill 389. That's another overreach of our state government. It hampered millions of dollars to Nampa, $2 or $3 million a year, I believe it is, that they could be using for other things. And the state basically kept that just by enacting new legislation. So yes, it does affect local communities, and we should stay out of local communities when we can, but step in when we should.
I'm good, thank you. Local control is the best. That is the best way to govern, and that is the way that it should be done. But sometimes the state has to step in as a referee. There's things that happen in different parts of the state that may not be happening in your area, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening somewhere else. So there are times that we do have to go ahead and step in. That being said, I think there needs to be good communication between the local and state levels. We have representatives. We have 105 legislators from all across the state that represent different parts, and we are very accessible to be able to talk with our local governmental officials. I take calls and emails and everything all the time to address issues that they might be having. Idaho is very lucky that we have an open door policy at the Capitol. You can come and access us anytime, anywhere, any place, just about. But yes, local control needs to remain, but sometimes the state has to step in as the referee.
Ms. Bishop?
The government closest to the people governs best. I think, I come from a really small town, a town of about 1,100 people, and what works in Boise is not going to work in my hometown. And what works in Sandpoint isn't necessarily going to work in Soda Springs. So the only time that the state should step in is when you have a multiple sizes of cities, multiple municipalities with different needs coming in and say, okay, we need some help here. We need this to be uniform throughout the state, and it's going to work for everybody. And other than that, we leave as much local control to local governments as we can.
Okay. Senator Adams.
Please repeat the question.
Okay.
We're halfway through the circle.
Republicans have typically advocated for less government, but we're seeing more state legislation reaching into local government level. A few examples: library content and city ordinances around short-term rentals. Now, in the past, these have been the purview of local school boards, library districts, and city councils. Is it appropriate for the state to legislate on such local matters? Why or why not?
Thank you. Yeah, so I want to touch on both of these. First, the specific issues that were brought up. For the low-income housing complexes, that's a private property right issue. The cities were coming in these cities were saying, you have to provide this low-income housing, forcing them into a government box. Private property rights matter, and that is where the state should step in. As far as libraries go, harmful material to minors has no business in public libraries. It doesn't. And so I think there are times when the state does need to step in, just like we intercede between the federal government and our citizens. Sometimes that state government steps down and intercedes between a local government pushing something onto the citizens.
Okay. Mr. Rodriguez?
I am a Nampa City Councilman. And it's almost like every year, sitting up here making decisions for our communities for land use and taxes and direction for transportation and livability, the cost of living, trying to keep our budgets down to not hurt our community. Then we find a law that's passed without any communication with the cities. Now we have to adjust. Now we have to go back and fix this in lieu of what we should have been involved in that decision. I'm asking that if the legislators decide to become involved with their local government, then they ought to be right here with us talking to us. And I haven't seen that yet. So there's my answer.
Okay. And Mr. Bell, I believe you're the final person to have that question.
Okay, thank you. It's good being last sometimes. It's said that all politics are local, and all politics are local when it's good for everyone. I think that we have state legislators and state legislation to protect the local populace from tyranny or rogue local governments. That's why we have it. And so when the local citizens are being affected in a negative way by policies that the local government has deemed necessary, then yes, I believe that the state legislature and legislation should step in to protect the local government, sometimes from themselves. Because when we look at it, like, we mentioned library books. Who really wants pornography to our kids, elementary kids, in our schools? Okay, well, you got some local people that felt that was necessary, and I believe then it's time to protect kids and protect the bigger populace, that the legislation and legislature should definitely step in those cases.
All right. Thank you so much. This ends our first panel. Thank you so much for answering. We'll take a quick break so that we can seat the members in District 13 who are running. Thank you.
We're going to work from my right to the left on this particular round. So Republicans have typically advocated for less government. We've seen legislation reaching into local government level. A couple examples are the library content bills, city ordinances around short-term rentals. In the past, things of this issues such as these have been left to local school boards, library districts, and city councils. So the question is it appropriate for the state to weigh in on these local matters and explain why or why not? You have 1 minute.
Steve Tanner. Yeah, it's a great question. For instance, in the case of the library bill, I think it is appropriate for the state to step in those kinds of situations because the matter was left up to the local government or local agencies, and the concern was not being taken care of. So there was a need to normalize, to set expectations for what is correct behavior. We do have a obscenity code in Idaho that states very clearly what obscenity is and that it's harmful to minors. And but it wasn't being taken seriously at the local level. So in that case, it is. There are other instances where it's not correct. It's not the best way to go. Local government is, the government closest to the people is, the best form of government. That's a Republican principle. And we want to observe that as much as possible. But in some cases, like the library bill, the state should step in.
Would you like that repeated, Representative Roten?
No, I've got it. Kenny Roten, and again, thanks to everybody for being here tonight. Yeah, the lightest touch from government is what we need. And local government, again, and I've stated before that, the government closest to the people is the best. The further we get away, when you get over to the state, you get to national, the less input you have. And we talk about some of these bills as much like the library and a number of bills, and you're seeing these model bills coming from out of state or from organizations that are writing these bills. You've got those kind of bills that are hitting us in Idaho, coming from Texas or different places, and we have to be careful with that. We need to be as light from the state level as we can. We certainly don't want that from the national level. If we want to get into the library bill, as for instance, because they have their local boards that were elected or appointed. And in Nampa, if you went to ask them, 167,000 checkouts, unique checkouts, 100,000 electronics in 23, 2 books were challenged. This was not a problem that needed state intervention. They could have handled this, and the school districts across the state, pretty good.
Ms. Henry, would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you. I think I'm good. You hear me okay? All right. I think when we're dealing with these issues, it's important to remember legislatively at the state level, we're not just dealing with Nampa. As legislators, we're dealing with our Nampa constituents, but at the state level, we're dealing with other districts that do have issues. So we may not see the issue here in Nampa, and I saw that when I was with the Nampa Citizens Academy. We met with our library, and they are trying to do their very best. However, we do have some of those books in that library, and I know that because my daughter checked them out, unfortunately. But what we need to do is get all the stakeholders at the table, for number one. And what I found through the chamber legislative mornings, when the legislators were getting together, our mayor had addressed some issues with the last library bill. And it wasn't that there was a problem with some of the bill, it was the details, right? The 5 days presenting the issue in the paper. It's very expensive for our city to put that in the paper for 5 days. It costs the taxpayers a lot of money. And she was concerned with that. And so the devil can be in the details, right? And so it's important that we communicate and that we all talk together. And it concerns me that we have the arrows sometimes that we throw at one another in a community, and instead of just sitting down and addressing and working together to get the best that we can get for our community.
Would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you. Jeff Hagenbrod, the government closest to the people is the best for the people. I believe in Idahoans, I believe in Americans, and I believe we can self-govern in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean that the state shouldn't step in from time to time, but that should be the exception and not the rule. One of the things we don't talk about is the funding side of the state government relative to the locals. When we are not properly funding the local police forces, because the state has cut back or inhibited the local communities, we're putting our people at risk. So we need to talk about the unfunded mandates that oftentimes happen when you get away from the local government. We in the state don't like the federal government telling us what to do, nor do the locals like the state government telling us what to do. We have good local people, and we need to govern from the local level as much as we possibly can. The state intervention should be an exception, not the rule.
Senator Lenny, would you like the question repeated?
No. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
So I think, so the two bills that you mentioned, the landlord property rights bill, that was a bill to protect property rights for landlords who were being forced to do something they didn't want to do. So I helped push that through in committee and on the floor. That was the state speaking, getting into local issues. We killed a bad library bill on the floor by one vote. I was the deciding vote on that. And then we passed a good library bill. So, I mean, as a state government, we tell local, we dictate local laws all the time. That's what we do. Nobody has a problem. Nobody has a problem with the state doing that when we're handing out money. It's just when we place restrictions on them. So I think we absolutely have the right and duty to speak to local issues from the state level.
All right. Question 2, we will start with Representative Roten. What is your grade of the legislature's performance this year? And considering your grade, how would you follow up on that over the next 2 years if you're reelected?
Kenny Roten, at the House, when the red light's on, it's on. It's green now. I gave us a B. There was a number of good things that we got through. Again, I think the 521, the school modernization, it was a big bill. They had a lot going on, but it did a lot of good things. And we had some things that got through that I didn't think we should have been involved in. And when you think about the amount of work that goes into these bills, some of them get the headlines, but I don't. As far as props go, when you see the list of bills from the House that come through the committees, come through the floor, when you're looking at 90 days and we're really 60 days in session because you're off weekends and you're passing 300 and over 300 bills, there's a lot going on. But I think we could do better. And I think if we get the right people back, we will do better. And I think that A is within reach.
Ms. Henry, would you like the question repeated?
Please.
What's your grade on the legislature's performance this year? And considering that grade, how would you follow up on that over the next 2 years if you are elected?
Thank you. Oh, let's see. As a former educator, I would give them a C. I would have liked to have seen House Bill 447, the tax credit that didn't make it out of rev and tax, passed for parents. I also would have liked to have seen in rev and tax the bill for homeowners, taxpayers, the assessment bill that was killed twice in rev and tax. I will always vote for the taxpayer. I shouldn't say always. I would like to say I'm always going to vote for the taxpayer before big government. I believe as homeowners, when our tax assessment comes to us and it's gone up, we should be able to go to our assessors, who I believe are doing a great job, and ask them to show us why our assessment has gone up. And that didn't make it out of committee. That committee voted that we should not be able to see why the assessments are what they are, and I don't understand that. I believe as taxpayers, you should be able to see what those are. And I don't know if you know that, but you cannot public records request that information as taxpayers. And it's very difficult to gather that information. So those are things that I would bring right away, bring back, and want to see changed.
Would you like the question repeated, Mr. Agenbrod?
No, thank you. I think I have it. Jeff Agenbrod, I would give the state legislature this year a B- or a C. Let me talk about a couple of things that I liked that happened this last legislative session. We did receive some substantial property tax relief, but not permanent, so we'll come back to that one. We have income tax relief that I like, and we also have a bill, that same bill, as a matter of fact, that provided money for our school facilities, which is very needed. Where we failed, I believe, is providing permanent property tax relief. We've been wrestling with this issue for maybe a decade. Property tax in Idaho is a very complex problem, or not problem, but complex formula that has created problems. Every county is affected differently, so one size fits all solution, excuse me, is very difficult to come by, but we've got to do a better job. The property tax relief that we have right now is really, in my opinion, just a Band-Aid, and a comprehensive property tax relief is needed. We also needed to straighten out our school funding formula. It's antiquated. We're not properly funding our schools. We need to redistribute, get the money where the kids are, and that's, again, long overdue.
Senator Lenny, do you have the question, or would you like it again?
I think I got it. And you can hear me okay still? Just checking.
Yes.
Perfect. So I would give us a D because we, as a Republican trifecta, should be able to ram through any conservative bills we want. And a lot of really good conservative things got stopped and held up in committee by Republican chairmen. Things revolving, mask mandates and, DEI and things like that. We didn't do anything with the grocery tax. People can't afford their damn groceries right now. I actually agree with Mr. Agenbrod. Our property tax relief we did in 2023 is just a gimmick. We haven't done anything permanent or meaningful that provides actual relief. We can't afford, Idahoans can't afford gas. So these kitchen table issues were swept aside so we could pass bills like House Bill 521, which I voted against because it was unconstitutional. It hit, I think, more than 12 different subjects in one bill. And it didn't provide income tax relief. Yeah, it saved people about $42 a year in income tax, but it was an unconstitutional bill. So we're getting, instead of
time. I know you can't see our timing cards, but it's time.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I give us a D, and email me or call me later for how I can fix it.
And moving it to Steve Tanner.
Please repeat.
How would you grade the legislature's performance this year? And then based off of that grade, how would you follow up over the next 2 years if you are elected?
Yeah, Steve Tanner. I think maybe B-ish. I think one of the great things that happened this time was the breaking out of the budget into maintenance items, compared to the new costs, new programs. So that was a big plus. But also, there were some things that, that went through, but it could have been better. For example, we talked about the library bill. That's a good thing that is a step in the right direction, but I think it needs some more teeth. It needs some bolstering. That it could be a stronger bill. Going back, work on that to help that along. Bill 447, the tax relief for parents that want to send their children to charter schools, private schools. I wish that had gone through. It didn't. And then also, what was the other thing I was going to say? But I mean, those are a few examples of where I wish things had gone through, but we need. Oh, I remember what I want to say. The grocery tax, Brian mentioned the grocery tax. Why do we still have the grocery tax? That's an obvious thing that we need to take care of. Another thing that I think is, I'm really surprised that we haven't talked about in terms of property tax is for seniors. Why are seniors continuing to pay for school bonds as part of their property tax? I don't know about you, but 25% of my property tax is paying for school bonds and levies. So I think there's some work that needs to be done there.
All right, moving right along, we will start with Amy Henry here. Idaho's Constitution allows citizens to gather signatures and put initiatives on the general election ballot. Do you support this form of direct democracy, and why or why not?
Well, I support our Constitution 100%. And I believe if we're not supporting our Constitution, we definitely should not be doing this job, for starters. As we the people, I believe we need a mechanism to be able to bring things forward. And so the initiative process gives us that mechanism. I do believe that you need to have 26 signatures to bring that forward, that initiative forward. I'm sorry?
26,000.
To start the process. To start the process, yes. No, to initially start the process. And then, yes, you need thousands of signatures for the ballot, to get it on the ballot. So it is a great process for anybody to be able to start that process. That's where I was going with that. So to just start the process, anybody in this room can have an idea and bring it forward. So just a small part of this room can have an idea and bring that forward. So it doesn't take thousands initially to start the process, to get the initiative process petition going. And that's what I really appreciate about that. And I don't know that everybody realizes that, but it just takes a few dozen to start it and then get the petition ballot process going. And it is a very good mechanism for citizens. So yes, I do believe it's a great process.
Do you have the question, Mr. Egenbrod?
I do have the question, thank you. Jeff Egenbrod. Yes, I do support the people's voice. And this is one mechanism that we have in Idaho. And we're, last time I counted, there was only 26 states in the union that actually had an initiative or the referendum process where the citizens can actually remove laws that are in place as well. That gives us a citizen's voice. We have a high bar in Idaho, so we don't have a tremendous number of initiatives that are hitting our ballot like some other states that have been used as a bad example. What I would like to see is a little more transparency in the initiatives relative to the financial cost of the initiative. I think that's one thing that we're lacking and probably something that's evolved in more recent years. So I wouldn't mind seeing us put a requirement that there has to be a cost of whatever the initiative is disclosed to the public so they can make the financial decision as well as the policy decision. It's important that our laws are difficult to put on. The initiative process should not be any easier nor difficult than the legislature putting up and passing a law. So I like our balance where we are.
Senator Lenny, would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you.
We'll move on to Steve Tanner, and if Senator Lenny's back on, we can move it back to him. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Steve Tanner. I do support it. It is part of our Constitution, our state Constitution, and it's a good process that gives the opportunity for the people to raise their voice. If the legislature is not hearing them, if they're not addressing concerns, then it's a vehicle for the people to bring a concern to the legislature. A concern that I have, though, about initiative processes, especially as we've seen it in other states, and I think maybe we saw it here in Idaho with the ranked choice voting initiative, is out-of-state money that is pushing it forward, and having people in the state who are operating, gathering signatures, who may not even be residents of Idaho. So the question is this really the voice of the people, or is this the voice of an out-of-state organization?
Representative Roten, are you good on the question?
I got it, yeah. Kenny Roten, yeah, I think the initiative process is important, and of course, I think the transparency is something that could be improved, but this is something that the people are bringing, just if you have, we have the right to redress our government if that's an issue, and so if the legislature is not listening for whatever reason, and the initiative, I mean, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of people to get these initiatives, to the point where it is going to be on a ballot. And frankly, your legislator is working for you. I'm working for the people, and it's the very same people that are signing these initiatives. So I think it's a good thing. Yeah, some of the out-of-state influence. We had a vote. I voted for disclosing that they're being paid when they're out, if they're being paid as collecting signatures, because there's a difference between, like you say, the out-of-staters coming in perhaps with an agenda versus a grassroots, because Idaho laws should be about Idaho citizens, and I believe in that.
I see the BL icon.
I'm looking at Amy. Do we have?
Senator Lenny, can you hear us? We'll keep it moving for now. Hopefully we reconnect. I believe it starts on Mr. Agenbrod here. It's estimated that only 7% of registered Idaho Republicans participate in this year's presidential caucus. What are your ideas to expand participation and interest in our democracy?
Jeff Agenbrod. Yes, I think that's a tragedy that only 7% of the people had a voice. But that actually isn't much lower than our voter turnout in Canyon County historically. So we have to find a way to get the populace engaged. I don't believe a caucus is that way. I would like to see us go back to a presidential primary where we can get the votes of the people that are unable to go to the polls for whether it's work-related, whether they're in the military, whether they're serving out of the area, or certainly our first responders on shift oftentimes live in a different community than they work. So we have to remove any barriers that we can to get the voters to the poll. One other thing that we really need to push is a voter information guide. We did not pass the funding of that voter information guide from a state level this last session. And I think that's really something that should be put out there for the people to further engage them in the process and motivate them to get to the polls in any fashion that they see fit and get that done. I'm really pleased in Canyon County that we are going to have more polling places this election than we've had in quite some time. So that should reduce the lines and encourage people to get out to vote and cast their vote, have their voice heard.
Mr. Tanner, would you like it repeated? It looked like you were writing something down, so I think you heard it.
I was. Please repeat.
The estimated that just 7% of registered Idaho Republicans participate in this year's caucus. What ideas do you have to expand participation and interest in our democracy?
Right. Steve Tanner. I don't think that the low turnout for the caucus was necessarily a referendum on the caucus process. I think that the GOP did a great job in putting that together. It was a great effort. I think that there was a couple things that complicated this situation. One was that the timing of it, and people were confused. Why are we having a caucus and not a primary? That wasn't very well understood. The second was that it was a president-only caucus, and the person who, the president who was elected in Idaho, or that won the caucus in Idaho, was a heavy favorite. So I think those are a couple factors as to why a lot of people may not have turned out. As far as increasing interest, I'm a precinct committee man. I have been for a couple of years, and I'm very active in our district. I think getting our precincts active and moving and in contact with the people, relaying information to the people, carrying that information back to our legislature is a very important function. And I think with a healthy district at the precinct level, that will help increase voter information and participation.
Representative Roden?
Yep, I got it. Kenny Roten? Yeah, the caucus this year, there was a lot of moving parts that got us to that caucus, to that situation. And there were efforts, a lot of efforts to get us back to a primary that we just weren't able to get there. I would say, one, I wanted to get back to the primary, but the caucus, the one I went to at Columbia High, it was well-ran, well-staffed. There was some confusion with regard to when it was going to end. The start time was pretty clear, but when it was cut off, there were questions, and I heard from all over about that. But and that is something that was new, and they were running. I would hope that that's not something that we do again, though. The primary does turn out more people. I think that perhaps the local media, because here tonight we're talking about District 13 and we're talking about us, and we should be talking to our friends, our neighbors. The newspaper, our local media can help with the interest. Showing what's being worked on in the Capitol, what's happening as far as being considered. People have to know how it's going to impact them, and they will get motivated.
Ms. Henry.
Thank you. Yes, Amy Henry. I would hope, and I would push when I am there, to get us back to a presidential primary. I think it's very important. As a wife of an Air Force veteran, I struggled greatly with the fact of those that were disenfranchised with the caucus. It was the week prior, I believe, that we had a fallen soldier brought back to Idaho. I believe he was from Emmett. And I know Idaho is a proud military state, and he would not have been allowed to vote in that presidential caucus. We had many doctors, first responders, our police officers, I could go on and on, that were not allowed to vote in that presidential caucus. That was really hard for me personally, and I know it was hard for other family members, other Idahoans. So personally for our family, that was a tough one. I know people worked really hard, and so I appreciate that, and I thank them for that, but it is really important, I believe, that we get back to a presidential primary.
Senator Lenny, I'm coming your way. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know what happened earlier. I didn't hear the question.
I'm prepared to ask the question. It's estimated that just 7% of registered Idaho Republicans participate in this year's presidential caucus. What are your ideas to expand participation and interest in our democracy?
Thank you for that question. I had to laugh a little bit because I think maybe not getting rid of it in the first place would have been a good solution. I voted against the bill that got rid of the caucus. There's people in the room there, just generally speaking, that actually voted to get rid of the caucus. So maybe that would have been the first one, maybe just not getting rid of the primary in the first place. But as far as how do we get more people to participate politically, you got me. I have a degree in political science, and I had, talked about that with professors. That's the age-old question. I don't think that's unique to Nampa. I wish we would have kept the primary. That's why I voted to not get rid of it. But at the end of the day, when the governor signed the bill, we can thank him for that. But, what do we do? I don't know. Whoever figures that out is going to be a billionaire.
Senator Lenny, just keeping us on track, I was going to start with you for the next question as well.
We'll come back to the initiative question at the end.
Okay. Do you think it's the legislature's job to make statements or take positions on national issues?
It's not our job. Should we? I guess it's up to the person. I mean, I think, what happens at the national level trickles down to the state and local level, like our joke of a president, like, like I mentioned earlier, grocery prices, gas prices, hyperinflation, that's being fueled by hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is being fueled by, the national debt being out of control, and they keep printing money. The gender bending, woke garbage they're pushing on kids in schools. We could go on and on. Our wide open border, thank God we passed like the mandatory minimums bill this year to deal with fentanyl and drug trafficking. But the stuff that happens at the national level absolutely affects our state. So is it our job to comment on them?
10
No.
seconds remaining.
Thank you. It's not our job, but what fun would it be if we didn't have positions on national issues, right?
Mr. Tanner, the floor is yours.
Steve Tanner. I think it definitely is in the domain of the responsibilities for the legislatures to comment, especially when there is so much money coming from at the federal level into the state. So there's that two-way conversation is going on. As a case in point, it was brought up about, that we have the open border. And that's an issue that is heavily impacting Idaho. Senator Lindy brought up the problem with fentanyl, cartels that are showing more of a presence in the state. So yes, and that's because of national policy. So yes, we do have, I think, a responsibility to speak to those issues.
Yep. Kenny Roten. Yeah, it is a situation where we can speak to those national issues and to the federal government. Whether they're going to listen to us is a whole nother program. But there are situations where we sign on to, as a state, sign on to amicus bills and get in with other states in agreeing and supporting positions that on a federal level. But again, it's the state that we're working for when we're there. I mean, that is what our charge is. That's what we're responsible for. We did, the joint memorials, things like that, and some that we signed with regard to Biden's handling of the border, or not handling of the border, and situations like that. There's not a lot that we can affect as far as that goes, but we certainly can give our opinion and lend support to it. I wish that our government would look at the way Idaho handles our balanced budget. That'd be nice. As mentioned, we've got inflation issues. We've got things that this government federally is doing every day that affects us, that, when they throw rocks at the fossil fuel industry and then wonder why gas prices are so high. It is something that we have to be aware of, but we run the state's business.
Ms. Henry.
Thank you. Amy Henry. I believe some of the most important things that we do in the legislature is dealing with the Federalism Committee and the administrative rules. And they're not very pretty, and so they're not talked about very much, but they deal with the federal government coming into our state. It's how we got Common Core into our schools. House Joint Memorial 11. I would have voted in favor of that memorial. The incumbent didn't. But having said that, what is very important to me, and one of the very big reasons I'm in this race, has to do with a lot of the division that we see in the state. And as a mother and a former educator, I believe it is very important that we as adults are better role models, and that we pay very close attention to how we behave, not only day to day, but online in social media. And I've been beat up a little bit for saying this, but I think it's very important. My children have had 12 friends commit suicide over the last few years, and our youth suicide rates are very high. And we have got to do a better job being better role models. I believe, and how we're handling ourselves and what kind of role models we're being.
Do you have the question, Mr. Eichenbrod?
I do have the question, thank you. Jeff Eichenbrod, I do think that there is a time and a place for the states to weigh in on federal policy. The U.S. Constitution, the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution enumerates all powers to the states that are not explicitly detailed in the federal government. The federal government sometimes encroaches on our rights as provided by the 10th Amendment, and we need to push back. Idaho is largely owned by the federal government. You look at the federal lands in Idaho. We need to talk to them about how they're managed. We do a really good job of managing our state lands, and there are times and places that the federal government could learn from us to manage lands next door to us. We have a good neighbor agreement. This is really up in timber country where we work with the federal lands, on state lands, and private timber people that really works well. So there's again times and places. The border affects us every single day. And although it's a long ways from here, we need to do what we can to understand what's happening and keep our communities safe. So it is important that we do weigh in. The primary goal of the legislature is to do the state's business, but we need to have conversations with the feds periodically.
So this is our last question here on this round, and Senator Lenny, I'll be sure to get to the one that you missed as well on that cutoff. But we'll start with Steve Tanner here. We've seen Idaho laws that result in legal challenges and special sessions, which are costly to taxpayers. What could be done to minimize unclear or controversial legislation?
Steve Tanner. I think in the process of putting laws together, that a lot more work needs to be done in making sure that the laws are constitutional. What's being proposed is constitutional, and that they'll work in if they're litigated. I think we need to ask also about some of our laws. Are they functional? If they're implemented, how would they really work? What would it cost to implement them? And who? And then there's the question of enforcement. Who bears the burden of enforcement? So we need to have these things talked out and clear before they get passed.
Kenny Roten, yeah, it would be nice to have clearer bills, and often, and I think what we're seeing is, as opposed to coming with some of the grassroots ideas, again, we're seeing some of these model bills coming. We're seeing some of these bill mills that are putting these bills in these legislators' hands. I mean, there were some legislators this year that just ran a ton of bills that you wondered where they were coming from. They were all over the board. And some of them seem to be somewhat purity tests. We talk about, being how far conservative are they, and some of these bills just really seem to be reaching into people's lives, and you wonder, where did this come from? And we had a number that seemed to fit that bill. But again, you've got an AG that is there. We've got lawyers. LSO, the Legislative Services Office, has lawyers. Some of these, though, are just not getting vetted as well as they could. And so I think there's opportunity, again, to go from a B to an A. We get the right people coming back to the legislature. I think you'll see some improvements.
Amy Henry, I think it's really important that we're being careful to run bills that are well-written, that are not being run for special interests. I'm just going to say it. That they are not being run because they have a certain score. And there's the elephant in the room. But we're bringing bills forward that are constitutional, and that we bring all the stakeholders to the table. When I ran my parental bill of rights that was signed into law last year, and I had another bill as well, I had as many stakeholders at the table as I could. You want them in front of as many eyes as possible. The more people that see it, the more things they're going to see, the more input you're going to have, and the better bill you're going to have. You want the legal review, obviously, and you want to run them through LSO because they're going to see what state statute. You're going to make sure that it's legal, obviously. And if that's not happening, the bill should not be run. I've been told each piece of legislation that we're seeing down there is costing the taxpayers $2,000, just one time for it to go through LSO. And a lot of those go through 10, 12 times. So it's expensive, and we need to be sensitive to that.
Jeff Hagenbrod, and thank you for the question. Yes, I think we need to do a better job writing our bills. Every word, every period, every comma, every space in every bill affects somebody. So we need to be more thoughtful. We certainly need to understand our Constitution and not write any bills that are unconstitutional from the get-go. And we need to respect the process. If you look at the last couple of years, the legislature has crammed through, and I use the word cram because that's what's happening, through big bills, complex bills, and these are oftentimes the bills that are challenged in the courts. So what that tells me, everybody likes to eat the sausage, but nobody likes to see it made. We need to do a better job building those bills to get the people's will into law and across the finish line without the court battles. We do not need the courts writing the laws in Idaho. That's up to the legislative branch. And the more we put them in court, the more the courts are writing our laws. We have to get away from that.
Senator Lenny, are you good on the question?
Could you repeat it one more time? I forgot the first part.
No problem. We've seen Idaho laws that result in legal challenges and special sessions which are costly to taxpayers. What can be done to minimize unclear or controversial legislation?
Okay, thanks. I don't feel like anyone addressed the first part of the question. Special sessions have been called by our governor, and they're not over the ones that, since I've been last several years, they're not over controversial bills. Special sessions have been called by the governor to cram his agenda down our throats. So that's one thing. I'm not really. So when we say what should be done to minimize controversial bills, we're kind of assuming that we should be minimizing controversial bills. I mean, we're in the middle of a massive culture war. You know, people are trying to convince children to cut their genitals off. People, like, if these are controversial things that are being pushed on us, and we have to respond in kind. So a lot of these bills aren't something we're just coming up with in a back room somewhere. They're bills that are in response to what's happening. So, I mean, we're in the middle of like I said, we're in the middle of a massive culture war. So I don't know if we can minimize these bills, a lot of them, to be honest.
All right, and then we have one more for Senator Lenny before we call it a day here. Idaho's Constitution currently allows citizens to gather signatures and put initiatives on the general election ballot. Do you support this form of direct democracy, and why or why not?
Thank you. So I'm not a big fan of mob rule. So, I mean, we have a representative republic. So there's two parts. A, if it's in the Constitution, obviously I support it, right? We took an oath to defend the Constitution, so that's what we're going to do. Now, the ballot initiative process is used historically and has been used mostly by left-wing activists to corrupt conservative states and push policies onto people they don't want. So it's in the Constitution. Obviously, it's constitutional. Can we change the Constitution? Yes. Because these bills end up in the legislature anyhow. They use the ballot initiative process to put term limits, to push through term limits, and then it went to the Idaho legislature, and they went, nah, we're going to overturn it. So it winds up with the legislature anyhow. Personally, I would like to see the ballot initiative
10 seconds.
Personally, I would like to see that process gutted from the Constitution because the only people who really use it are left-wing activists. But do I support it currently? Yeah, because it's in the Constitution.
All right, thank you all so much, and we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll come back with our candidates from District 23 and from House Seat A in District 10.
May I say, it is 20 signatures to start the initiative, step one.
House Seat A, we have Chris Bruce, and we have Melissa Durant, Representative Durant. And then from House Seat B, Sean Dygert, and Tina Lambert had a schedule conflict and could not attend. So Sean is unopposed in this forum anyway. And the same in House District 10, Representative Moyle, his opponent is Rachel Hazlip, and she said she's not participating due to a conflict. So thank you to our final panel this evening.
I will start the questions.
Betty, just a reminder to all, because some of the people were outside, you'll get a 10-second reminder, and then time is up. So
Yes. Also, if you all wouldn't mind just restating your name before answering a question. We have people online that can't all see the name tags up front, so if you can just repeat your name before answering the question when it comes to you. All right, question 1. We'll start with Chris Bruce. What is your grade of the legislature's performance this year? And considering that, how would you follow up on that over the next 2 years if elected?
Chris Bruce, I would probably give it a C to a C plus. I think there were some bills that I would like to have seen addressed. Property tax is still based off of unrealized gain. I would like to see that changed. The other thing is that we discussed in City Council mitigation fees that help offset some of the levies that schools would need to on new growth. No one wanted to seem to take that up. And then I'd like to see the death penalty for sexual predators for children.
Representative Durant, would you like the question repeated?
No, thank you. I would give us probably about a B minus. We did a lot of good work, but we have a lot of room to grow. We were able to pass some good bills, but a lot of our bills this year were start or stuff to work on. Our property tax bills were things that we needed to continue working on. We had an ag preservation area one. That one still needs to be worked on. So we gave us quite a good framework to work on. And of course, there's always stuff that you wish had gotten through that didn't go through, or ideas that came up towards the end of session that it's just better that you stop and let's work on these for next session. But overall, we really tried our best to do what was best for the members of the state, and I believe it was really shown with what was passed this year.
Mr. Dygert.
Would you please read it?
No problem.
Thank you.
What was your grade on the legislature's performance this year? And considering that grade, how would you follow up on that over the next 2 years if you are elected?
Sean Dygert. I would give the legislature a solid B. There's some things that came through. I thought they met some really specific needs that are near and dear, especially to the District 23 that I'm going to represent, in terms of some funding for invasive species. The quagga mussel is a big deal when the Snake River runs right down the heart of your district with 2 dams and all the pressurized irrigators. That's a huge issue. I thought, and being an agricultural teacher, some of the things that happened with career technical education across the board was solid pluses and strengthened our CTE programs across the state. I think some of the things we could do to help agriculture and make sure that's a viable part of our economy, especially where you figure that every ag dollar rolls over about 7 or 8 times within a local community. And I've had car dealers in Nampa tell me they can tell you when cattle prices are down because on the number of pickup trucks they can sell. And so it really affects everybody. Following up, make sure that we preserve the property tax right, the private property rights, and then working to make it so people can afford to stay in their homes are going to be some of the things to follow up on.
And Representative Moyle.
Thank you. You guys are too pessimistic. I think it's an A minus or a B plus. Talk about some of the things we did this year. Income tax reduction, property tax reduction, $1 billion for schools, $1 billion. These school districts will all be able to afford new buildings without any tax increases, which will also help property taxes. We changed the budget process this year. We now have a maintenance budget, and you can see the add-ons, something we should have done a long time ago. Transparency, what a great thing. What's wrong with that? Those budgets have been gamed for years, and we've last 2 years made progress in getting there. We did a bunch this year. The rules, how many of you understand the rules and regulation on government, how they affect you? Did you know that we did some bills this year? We got national attention for what we did there. Rules have the effect of law. Now they have to be passed by both bodies like any other law. Now the judge has to look at it neutrally. Even the Goldwater Foundation had praising things to see about what the Idaho did. Judges, we did bills this year to help elect our judges. How many of you understand that our judges are getting appointed? 52 of 48, last I looked, were appointed and not elected. Our founding fathers wanted judges elected. They should be sitting up here like this. We got some of that stuff done this year. Great stuff. Elections. We got a bunch of stuff done on elections this year, and you probably haven't heard about it. We finally got ballot harvesting fixed in the state of Idaho. What a great thing. So to be pessimistic about all the things that we got done is wrong, I think. I think we worry about the things that didn't get done and don't remember all the good things we did get done. And there's time next year to fix the holes that we didn't get done this year. Thank you.
Next question will begin with Representative Durant. Idaho's Constitution currently allows citizens to gather signatures and put initiatives on the general election ballot. Do you support this form of direct democracy? Why or why not?
Melissa Durant. It's in the Constitution, so it's meant to be there. There's a reason that we wanted it for our state. And so, yes, it's something that I support, as long as it is something that we support that comes from our members, the citizens of our state. Oftentimes, the initiative can become an idea from someone out of state and then it gets pushed, which is not the purpose of it. Our purpose is when those of us in the legislature or other things are not meeting some of the needs of our citizens that they feel, it gives them an option to bring their ideas out, to be voted on for how they want their state to be. Because ultimately, if the citizens aren't happy, then the state's not going to run the way it needs to be. And so having that initiative, and yes, we don't use it very often, and a good chunk of that is because we listen to the citizens in our district. We listen to the people in our state. And it shows because it has not been used as much as you've seen it in other states. And so I think it's a good tool to have because it's also a check and balance for those of us in the legislature to make sure we're doing our job.
Okay, Mr. Dygert.
Since it is with the Constitution, I fully support it, and I do support the initiative process, and I do support that it does need to come from Idaho citizens and be Idaho ideas. And I do like the standard that it takes. It's a pretty high bar for initiative to come up. One of the things you have to recognize about freedom, when you enjoy the freedom to bring up the ideas that as a conservative person that I would follow and bring up on any particular issue, I have to recognize there's other people that disagree with me that need to enjoy the same freedom. And what I need to do is be proactive in being able to defeat those things in forums such as this or at the ballot box and working in those areas. But we got to remember, to maintain that freedom, it means freedom for everybody. And that initiative process does provide that, and I do like the bar it has and the ability of the Idaho citizen to bring those issues up.
Okay, Mr. Moyle.
I'm okay with the initiative process, but I have concerns, right? I think there needs to be some accountability. Think about what's going on right now with the ranked choice voting issue that you're hearing about that they're getting signatures for, right? If you go down and talk to them, they'll tell you what you want to hear to get you to sign it, but a lot of what they're telling you isn't really what it does, right? So you've got an initiative coming to Idaho that's brought by out-of-state money that somebody doesn't live here. They're pouring money into it. People are getting signatures. They're getting elected to do that, and they're not being honest with you about what you're signing. So if we're going to have the initiative process, I'm okay, but we need to have some transparency, and we need to have some sideboards on it. So at least they're being honest with the Idaho citizens, right? So we're not selling them a bill of goods. At least the money is coming from Idaho. At least the support's coming from Idaho. Because if the initiative is really about Idahoans, taking care of Idahoans and making law, then it ought to come from Idahoans and not some rich person in another state. So I'm good with it, but I think there needs to be some constraints.
Great. And finally, Mr. Bruce.
Chris Bruce, I actually agree with Representative Moyle. The transparency would add a lot to it. I do worry about out-of-state funds, out-of-state PACs, out-of-state anything funneling money into Idaho to change the ballot initiative, but I'll always fight for the community to be able to have a voice. No matter what I do, I'll fight for that. Thank you.
All right, we will start this with Sean Dygert. It's estimated that just 7% of registered Idaho Republicans participate in this year's presidential caucus. What are your ideas to expand participation and interest in our democracy?
Sean Dygert, I would like to get back to the primary and negotiate when that particular date's going to be. And I've been involved in the Republican Party for a long time, and you know, when our presidential primary was later in May, and the ability to bring a presidential candidate into the state and then pay attention to the small number of votes that we add into the process was difficult. Then we moved that primary up into the calendar, and all of a sudden we had some candidates coming into the state and starting to watch us and starting to pay attention so they could get onto the national scene a little bit with some of the things they did here in Idaho. But in District 23, we have areas in Hawaii County where it's an absentee mail-in precinct only, and we got folks that have to drive hours and hours if they potentially on some of the caucus things. And to make sure those folks can be heard, we need to get back to a primary.
Representative Moyle, would you like the question again?
Yeah, will you give it to me again if I think about this for a second?
Sure. It's estimated that just 7% of registered Idaho Republicans participated in this year's caucus, presidential caucus. What are your ideas to expand participation and interest in our democracy?
I think to keep our republic running, because we do live in a republic, I think it's important that we have voter turnout and that a lot of people show up, the better it is, right? This last time around, you saw a situation where a bad bill got through. There was a disagreement between the legislature and the party, and between the House and the Senate too. Because if you remember, the signatures were on the House side to go back to a March primary where there was more participation. So I would prefer the March, or at least a primary. I'm hoping that the party and the legislators in the next year or two before we have another presidential election can get together and come up with a compromise that they all agree to. This last time, I think that it worked, and I commend the party for what they did and what they pulled off, but I think that I would prefer to have a primary where there's more involvement and more people can vote and be there. I also understand the concerns of having it earlier so that we have, presidential candidates show up. So I think, though, to fix this solution, it needs to be the party and the legislators working together. It can't be a top-down, like kind of happened with the process in front of them. So I'm hoping we get to get together and find a solution.
Mr. Bruce, are you good on the question?
Yes, sir. Chris Bruce. I'd like to see a primary as well. I'd like to find a way to get back to that. I was disappointed that it was removed without more awareness of what we were doing, at least to the community. But I would like to say thank you to the party, because without them putting on a caucus, nobody would have been able to vote. So at least they were at least allowed to cast a ballot.
And Representative Durant, are you good on the question?
I am, thank you. Melissa Durant. I would also like to see us go back to a primary. A primary just seems more of an Idaho way with the ruralness that we have, and we're a very diverse state in where our people live. And so a caucus may work great in some areas, but the same as Steiger just said, it doesn't work in our district. When you have mail-in ballots, you can't expect them to then come in and do a caucus when that's not the way they vote. But the biggest thing I think that we need to get all the citizens of Idaho back to be more productive in these things is getting them to understand and be more aware and more proud of their voice, and to know that every vote counts. And no matter what they think, that my voice doesn't matter. Everyone's voice matters. We've seen it in elections. We saw it last 2 years ago when we had our last legislative. Races were down to just less than 10 votes. Everyone needs to realize that their vote matters, and until people stop and do that, I'm afraid we're not going to be able to get the numbers to where we should be.
Okay. This one will be answered first by Representative Moyle. Do you think it's the legislature's job to make statements or take positions on national issues?
Absolutely, because it affects us, right? When our founding fathers put our republic together, the principle was was God, and then the individual, and then the state, and then the federal government. And that's been flipped around now, right? Everything's coming from the federal government down. Yesterday, I had the blessing of being in D.C. and sitting before the U.S. Supreme Court talking about this very issue, that they are making decisions that impact the state of Idaho and every one of you in this room, and we ought to have a say. Think about illegal immigration. We ought to have a say on that. Think about the rules and regulations that they shove down our throats. We're always fighting the rules and regulations in regards to water or our public lands and everything else. So absolutely, I think the state should be involved. In fact, I think we should do more to push back on the federal government, take back the state's rights, and put us back where I think our founding fathers intended us to be.
Mr. Bruce.
I agree. I think we should take a position on that. The federal government is pushing all of their ideology and things down onto our state. So if we don't take a position, then we'll be asleep at the wheel.
Representative Durant.
Melissa Durant, I agree. We need to make sure our voice is heard. When it comes to a lot of the federal things, we only have 4 voices there that technically represent Idaho, and they don't always agree. So if we jump up as a state and show a unifiedness as a state, that helps those 4 that are there to be able to know what we want, but that also is able to help the rest of the country know this is where Idaho stands. And we've seen different things that the federal government have brought down with the Snake River dams and other issues that they have tried to sneak by, thinking that the members of Idaho are not going to see. If we start at that level, they'll just have to deal with it. And it's not right. We should have more say than they do with what happens inside our borders.
And finally, Mr. Dygert.
Would you read it one more time, please?
You bet. Do you think it is the legislature's job to make statements or take positions on national issues?
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's mandatory that we do. And you take a district like 23, especially out in White County with all the public land use, you're talking, there's been several issues of the federal government coming after some of the landowners and the ranchers that have been pretty intrusive and overbearing. You're talking sage grouse habitat, we're talking wolf management, we're talking our natural resource usage. We have to take those kind of positions in order to get on that. And that's not to mention all the other issues that we have to take positions. We got to take a position on securing the border. We need to take control of where we're going to go with our schools and our education, and that has to be what we do. And so I don't think it's not only our responsibility, I think it's absolutely mandatory that we do in order to protect Idaho and keep Idaho what we want it to be.
All right, I believe we start this one on Mr. Bruce. Republicans have typically advocated for less government. We've seen such state legislation reaching into local government recently. Just a few examples: library content, city ordinances around short-term rentals. In the past, these have been the purview of local school boards, library districts, and city councils. Do you think it's appropriate for the state to weigh in on local matters such as that? And then why or why not?
I do. I believe that the state should set the baseline, and as long as the local government is working within those bounds, they should be allowed to do what the law allows. With the library bill, obviously, multiple districts doing different things. I think that it was important for the state to set that. There's been some other times where our local government has discussed either growth paying for itself or the ability to slow growth down where the state is threatened to step in. So I'd like to see them stay out of it at that point. So overall, I'd like to see them set the baseline and then let the city move within those.
Do you have the question, Ms. Duran, or do you want it repeated?
Will you repeat it again,
Sure.
please?
Republicans have typically advocated for less government. We've seen state legislation reach into local government recently, speaking about things such as library content, city ordinances around short-term rentals. In the past, these were left to the purview of local school boards, library districts, city councils. Is it appropriate for the state to weigh in on local matters such as these, and why or why not?
Melissa Durant, I would say it's appropriate on some things and other things it's not. There's a reason that there's the state there for oversight, which gives, your baseline, gives them tools. One thing we passed this year was 608, an agricultural protection agency. That gave local governments another tool to do with land use. We've also had to pass things where, such as 2 years ago, we had to pass a bill because property taxes weren't going as expected. They didn't go back to the citizens. They went straight to that area in an urban renewal. So it's important for the state to step in where they need to, but it's also very important for the state to realize that there is local control, and there needs to be a balance between what falls under local control and what the state needs to do. But the biggest job of the state is for the framework and to give them tools so that they can be successful and lead the people where they're at.
Are you good on the question, or would you like it repeated?
No, I think I'm okay. Sean Dygert, I think for the state to intervene on and impose its will and authority over local government, there better be a really strong overarching reason to be able to do that. That's a very serious manner to try to micromanage local governments. On the library bill, I would have supported that library bill. There's things about it that I struggle with also, but creating some definitions and some parameters is pretty important there. And I know there's some issues coming up in District 23 the local governments are going to have to deal with. There's that big solar farm that's going to cross 20-some hundred or 2,000 some acres that's going to cover between Canyon County and Ada County that the Melba community is really going to have to deal with, and the county commissioners are going to have to deal with. I'm not sure that's an issue that the state should intervene on. But what the state should do is strengthen the local control to the point that the local citizens can make the determination if they do or do not want that particular business and enterprise to come into their community in the way that it's coming. And I think making it so that county commissioners and city councils and those folks can have the best tools they can to do the best job they can is what the state should do.
Mike Moyle, you know, this is an interesting question to me because it's one that we all struggle with. Because we want less local control. We all want, you know, the locals to have the most control. Stay out of it, leave us alone, let's do our thing. But a lot of times, the locals don't get the solutions or the problems solved for our citizens. So they have to have an ability to get them solved somewhere else. And that's where the legislature comes in. Remember, our Constitution has the legislature and it has the counties, but not the cities. And so there's always been this dynamic, this fight between the two. And I think it's healthy. I also think that if you've watched the last couple of years, there's been more input from the locals at the legislative level, and we've tried to work with them to find solutions. You've seen them in our meetings more than you've seen in the past as we try to work together. But sometimes you get to the point where somebody's got to make the decision, and that's not always easy. So yes, I prefer the locals take care of it on their own and that the legislature doesn't have to look at it. But when they can't get their problems resolved at the local level, the legislature's there, and that's why we end up fixing some of these problems, and that's why they end up at the legislature, because they can't get them solved at the locals. So hopefully the locals can take care of it, and then we don't have to worry about them at the legislature.
Okay. And final question, and we'll begin with Representative Durant on this one. We've seen Idaho laws that result in legal challenges and special sessions, which are costly for taxpayers. What can be done to minimize unclear or controversial legislation?
Melissa Durant. I think part of the biggest problem with this, it's not necessarily that it's controversial legislation. It's just legislation that can be misinterpreted or interpreted differently. And we've seen a lot of different views. Someone can read one line one way, another person can read it another way. A thing I think we can really do is start working on simplifying our words and trying to get the legislation that it doesn't have to be big and wordy, but it's legislation that's solid. And we pick the right words and we pick the right manners and have it vetted out to all groups so that everyone is on the same board when it comes to what the legislation is. Because once everyone knows and understands what it is, it's less likely to have those appeals against it because somebody doesn't like it. It's already been brought out, you understand how it is, and then it either works or it doesn't, but you've worked together and tried to find the best solutions to where people aren't wanting to just instantly, let's go to the courts and let's fight this.
Mr. Dygert?
There's a lot of legislation I think you need to make sure is fully vetted and all the interested parties, even those that oppose it, get chances to look at it, you know, dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure that it can withstand the legal challenges, and so that you don't end up in court over basically the business of Idaho. Unfortunately, we're living in a world now where there are some moral and ethical issues coming up that the legislature is going to have to take a stand on, and knowing that it will instantly be put into court. And I think the legislature should come to a very large majority and say, this is of such a nature, it is worth the money for us in Idaho to defend this topic from a moral and ethical issue, because it's just wrong. And there are some of those we know that fight will be automatic as soon as you pass them up. But as a matter of course of business, if you know you've got one that's a loser and it'll just end up in court, save the taxpayer the hassle and the money and try to get it right.
Great, thank you. Representative Moyle.
Thank you, Mike Moyle. This may sound weird, but I don't want to limit people's ability to bring legislation to the state of Idaho. I don't want to limit citizens of Idaho's ability to bring their ideas forward. In fact, I encourage it. And a lot of times, I think the best thing you can do is get those ideas out there and then adjust them. You'll see that happen a lot in the legislature, where we introduce a bill, and then everybody has their input, and you see us adjust it to try to make it work. To limit people's ability to do legislation based on the fear of a lawsuit, in my opinion, goes contrary to our republic, and I think is a mistake. I think that if we are running our state based on fear of a lawsuit, then we've got a problem. We need to do what's right. We need to have those discussions on those hard issues. We need to stand up, fight the fight, see how it falls. But no, I think that the best thing to do is encourage more and spend more time adjusting it to make it right once you get introduced.
Mr. Bruce?
Chris Bruce, I would agree with Mr. Moyle. I think that being threatened with lawsuits is just going to kind of deter people from bringing those ideas. And some of the things that we're going to need to do to protect the traditional values of Idaho are going to get challenged by people all over. That doesn't mean we should stop. So that's kind of where I stand.
All right, well, that concludes our questions for this evening. You have some reminders about voter participation.
Yeah, I almost forgot about that. I was packing up. All right, so last day to register is Friday, April 26th.
Tomorrow.
So get on it. You can vote early, May 6th through May 17th, between the hours of 8 and 5, Monday through Friday, and they're at the following locations here in Canyon County. We have the Caldwell Elks Lodge and the Hispanic Cultural Center. Last day to file for an absentee ballot is May 10th. Read the Idaho Press for complete election coverage. Thanks for including that, Claudia.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, thank you for attending and for staying the duration, because this is very important, and we appreciate everybody for coming. Thank you.
Do you have some final remarks?
No, thank you to Claudia, and thank you to Teddy, thank you to the candidates, families, and friends. Go vote.
Yep. Thank you.